Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this guy is Kevin Nealon. You probably know him best from his 9 seasons on SNL. Were you mad when other people broke your record, Kevin?
No. It made me happy that I did the right thing by staying a long time. A lot of people left quickly because they were frustrated and they wanted to become a star overnight. I knew I wouldn't become a star ever, so I stayed there a long time.
All right, well, it worked out well for you, though, anyway.
I did.
Also, we know you from your seasons on Weeds. We know you from a million different things you've done in your voice work. I love your YouTube show, Hiking with
Oh,
Kevin. It's so sweet. It's
thank
such a
you.
lovely, beautiful show. I love your stand-up. We can see you all over the place, but now you also are known to us as an artist and an author. Your brand new book, I Exaggerate, My Brushes with Fame. I see what you did
You
there.
see what I did there?
I
That's right.
see what you did there. It is art, it's caricatures, it's reminiscences, it's anecdotes about some of the biggest names in show business. It's people you've worked with, from Johnny Carson to Chris Rock to like all of these big, Tiffany Haddish, Steve Martin. I could go, David Letterman. I could go on and on all day. It is such a fun, unique way of telling stories, and I just loved it. So hi, Kevin, how are you?
Hi, Mary. How are you doing?
I am great. I want to ask you, because you were started out as a self-taught artist, but you
Mhm.
actually took a course so you could create the art in this book. You've been working on it just the last couple of years. What is it that, after a lifetime of drawing on napkins, drawing on vomit bags on planes, you wanted to take this step and take your art to a different level and then do this book?
Yeah. Well, like you said, I've spent my whole life kind of doodling and drawing, and I never really focused on it where I would get to this point where I would really commit to it and color it in and all that stuff. And like, yeah, I've been drawing on napkins and airplanes and barf bags, hopefully empty barf bags, of the passengers next to me. Usually when they're sleeping, they look like this. I
You're
never
making
show
me
this.
really paranoid now about flying, Kevin. I have to tell you.
I never show those people the pictures, but I do put their seat number on there in the flight number. So I've done all of that. And I would draw pictures of my friends or like comics on stage, and everybody wants the picture. No matter how bad it is, they would want the picture. So I was following a few artists on Instagram. And also, by the way, when I turned 60, I decided I would start really focusing on the things I talked about for a long time, but I never did. And one of them was drawing and painting and doing caricatures. The other was learning Spanish. So I take that twice a week now. Excuse me. Um, so I would follow these different illustrators and artists on Instagram. And about a year before the pandemic, I saw this one guy, Paul Moyse, and I really liked his style. And there's a few people I liked on there, Jason Seiler, Paul Moyse. And Paul Moyse was giving lessons in England. There were 500 euros for 10 lessons, if I remember correctly. And he was a seasoned artist. So I learned a lot from him. I learned how to do digital art as well. And then I just threw myself into it. I merged myself into just doing these things, and I did one after another, and each one was a labor of love. It took me, people say, how long did it take you to do this one and that one? And literally, because I'm more starting out, it took me maybe 2 weeks to do each one.
I really I appreciate, talking also about the Spanish, or doing your art or playing music. I think a lot of us, we reach a certain age and it gets harder to be a beginner. And you even talk in the book, like right at the beginning, about, hey, I'm a beginner at this, and having that kind of openness and humility. There's a lot of obstacles to that. There's a lot of fear, I think, I find, as we get older. How do you work past it? Do you feel that? Maybe you don't feel that kind of anxiety or fear or trepidation about being a newcomer or being a beginner at something.
Well, we all have to begin somewhere. It was the same with stand-up comedy. I knew I wouldn't be great at it when I started, but I would evolve over the years and find my style. And that's a lot with art. Like I said, I see a lot of illustrators on Instagram, and they are amazing. And I kind of look at mine and I go, oh man, what is this? What am I doing here? It's just really, but then I see how much people like it. Apparently they don't see the other artists, but they like, because it's coming from me, and they know me from SNL or Weeds or stand-up comedy. And so it's a little more special to them. But yeah, I'm not afraid anymore. I mean, since I started stand-up, I don't think there's anything more terrifying than getting on stage and looking for laughs. So this comes from being acknowledged before I even started that people like my stuff.
Is there a bit of advice you can give to those of us who are thinking maybe this is the year I start drawing, or this is the year I learn Portuguese? How do I take that first step? I mean, as you said, standing up in front of a crowd is one of the scariest things a person can do.
Well, for me, I heard the clock ticking, and I've talked about things all my life that I wanted to do, and this is something I've always wanted to do. And rehearsals are over. It's time to get going, and you have to kind of look at your life and think about what would be your regrets if you didn't do it as you are really old. And for me, this would be one of them, because I get so much feedback and joy from other people for doing it. It's like I couldn't do stand-up during the pandemic. And so I took to doing caricatures because it was another form of getting laughs. It was more of a visual stand-up style, because people would look at the funny pictures and then they laugh. So that's kind of my side of it.
Kevin, I want to ask about the people who you feature in this book and the selectivity, because obviously you have crossed paths with countless individuals in your career. You are very open and candid about your encounters with these people who had garlic breath, who played ping pong. What was the process of deciding who was going to be in the book? And were there people who were harder to write about? Was it harder to write about somebody like Chris Farley or Gary Shandling, people who are no longer here?
The writing part was easier because I had firsthand experience with them. Most of them, some of them I didn't, like Freddie Mercury from Queen. Then I would just reminisce about my first concert or concerts in general, or being in garage bands. But I think the more difficult thing was actually drawing those people, sketching those people. And some of them took me a long, long time to do. Myself, for example, I'm in the end, I tried all different kinds of variations of styles. And finally I settled on the one I have in the book. And then there's some really beautiful people that I had trouble finding caricatures for, and that's the other thing too, Mary. I'll go through life now and I'm like in a big fun house. Everybody I look at seems like a caricature, because in my head I'm thinking, how would I paint that person? How would I do that? And since the book came out, there's a lot more people I want to do. Maybe that's another book.
Okay. Well, I'm sure now now I feel like you must be looking at me with your art lenses, thinking like,
I'm totally sketching you right now. You just hold still. Maybe I'd get a good, accurate picture of you.
I gotta keep moving so I won't wind up on a barf bag somewhere, Kevin. That's the secret. Were there stories in this book that you felt like you couldn't tell? There's some really candid things in here. Were there things that you said, I'm not ready? I mean, you talk about Lorne Michaels, you talk about people who you've worked very closely with. Were there things where you said, oh, but I can't, I'm not yet ready to talk about? Because there are also people in here who you've crossed paths with, I noticed, aren't in the book. And I'm very curious about that.
That are not in the book?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Again, one of the ways I decided to draw people was I would either find a good reference picture of them and I knew them, or there's somebody that really interested me that I wanted to sketch. But I did not put a lot in the book as far as some things I knew about some people, but I did put a lot more in there that I shouldn't have. And in hindsight, I'm a little nervous about those people seeing it, because I'm getting feedback now from people that are in the book that I never thought would even see the book or the pictures or anything. And I'm thinking,
I want to ask about a lot of this book takes place in your time, or your memories of SNL, the experiences that you had I remember very clearly it being a really tumultuous era in the show's history. There was a lot of flux. There were a lot of people in and out. And I'm wondering, when you look back on that time, were there cast members or hosts or musical guests who really stand out now in hindsight as the most memorable, that maybe weren't the people who became the biggest stars, but just who stood out to you for a moment or a performance?
Wow, there were so many that stood out to me. I remember when Sting hosted, and he was also the musical guest. I mean, that was a heavy order right there to do both. And I remember just, hanging out with these people. It was just amazing. Or Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. You can't believe they're standing right next to you. But I was always a fan of Steve Martin's and Bill Murray's and James Taylor performed. And I actually stood next to James Taylor, who I grew up going to almost every concert on the East Coast, and learned how to play his songs on the record players. I had to drop the needle on each one, each groove. And for him to come on that show was just a dream come true for me. That's why I stayed there so long, because I knew what I was into. First of all, I was a stand-up comic. I never did sketch comedy. I never did improv. So I was just, in awe of everything that was happening and those people that were coming on. I saw Steve Martin when he was the Wild and Crazy guy at the Universal Amphitheater with the Blues Brothers opening up for him. And now here he is, we become friends and we play the banjo together, and we're body surfing somewhere together, playing poker. And I'm just living in a dream.
And still, I remember I was telling my producer, because I am old enough, Kevin, that I remember that moment on SNL when Sinead O'Connor tore up the picture of the Pope. Yeah. You were there for that.
I was sitting in the makeup.
That, and you are still, it seems like you were still a fan of hers, because you were referencing her set list not that long ago. What was it like then? So you must have like a fondness for her work. What was that moment like on live television? Because I think we think of it now as like the way the world reacted to the slap at the Oscars. It was the story in pop culture for a moment.
Yeah, it was. It truly was. I mean, I wasn't like a big fan of hers. I knew that one song, and my wife always kills me because I don't know how many days it's been or how many hours. It's been 15 days, She hates it when I get the lyrics wrong. So I knew that song. I didn't know any of the other songs she sang, but I thought she was very interesting with her shaved head, and she was attractive. But when she did that, she didn't do it during the dress rehearsal. She ripped up the picture of whatever she was supposed to rip up. But I was sitting in the makeup chair and we were all watching it. And then she held up the picture of the Pope and ripped it. And everybody went, ooh, ooh. And it's live TV, so there's nothing they can do about it. So there was some things like that were very memorable and part of pop culture. And I don't think there could be any place where else that could happen, because it was a live show and it was so popular, and it still is.
And I read an interview with you recently where you said something that really struck me about how your teenager keeps you kind of honest and keeps you, in your words, kind of woke. And as someone who is also a parent of teenagers, they are our reality checks, and they are, I think they can be our best consciences, but also there's often a temptation in life to be like kids these days and okay, boomer. And there is this tension and conflict generationally. And you seem to really be trying to learn from the younger generation. As someone who was literally politically incorrect PI, who has been in sketches that even now you look back and go, oh my God, I can't believe they did that on television. How do you reconcile the kind of comedy that you do and the ways in which you are evolving as a comic with the world we live in right now? It doesn't seem like you have any great attachment to being the person you were 30 years ago, or doing the kind of comedy that was on SNL 30 years ago.
Right. It was a different period then. I mean, we were all in the same boat. It wasn't like I was standing out and doing things that were worth canceling before, 25, 30 years later. We were all kind of, inappropriate in some ways and undereducated about sensitivity of different issues. But as a stand-up comic, I was never controversial. So there's nothing I can look back at and go, but on Saturday Night Live, sure. I mean, you look at some of these sketches that we did, and they were very, for that time period, edgy, but now thought of as being inappropriate and insensitive. But because of censorship, it's like some of these, Mark Twain books, like Huckleberry Finn. They don't take out the N-word because that was the way it was originally written. And I don't think they would censor out anything on SNL either. But also it's really a lesson to show how we can evolve as people and become more educated and have a better world.
And yet in the book, you've said that before, that you don't want to do comedy that could hurt people or that is controversial. And yet in the book, you have your stories about your friendships with people like Howard Stern, Dave Chappelle, Norm Macdonald, Chris Rock, people who really have spent their entire careers pushing that envelope.
Yeah.
It seems like you can be comfortable with that kind of comedy and you have a respect for that kind of comedy, even though that's not your own. Yet these guys have all also faced these charges of being canceled. How do you feel about that kind of dialogue that we have now around comedy and what is and is not appropriate?
Well, if you go back to Lenny Bruce and George Carlin, these guys were both very edgy and inappropriate in a lot of ways. It was the style at the time. It was, like I said, it was where we were at as a society, and now it's changed a lot. But I'll watch somebody like Chappelle and Howard Stern. I'll listen to him, or Chris Rock, and I'll appreciate where they're coming from. It's not necessarily what I would do, but when I watch a stand-up or somebody, I'm always analyzing them. I'm looking at their approach to their delivery. I'm looking at their craftsmanship of their material, and also the risks they're taking. And yet these are the biggest comics that are around now because they're controversial. And that's what attracts people to them and makes people watch them and talk about them. But I think they're just walking that fine line where they're not quite going over the edge. And if they do, they hit some turbulence and people try to cancel them. And someone like Chappelle will survive because of his stature and his delivery, and people love him.
I have to ask one more question because I did notice that a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, you posted that New Yorker cartoon that was something like, are you team old SNL cast or new SNL cast? So of course, I'm sure as any of the thousands of people now who've been cast members on SNL, you must get asked, what do you think about the show now and the direction it is and where it stands in its legacy? Do you watch it? Are there people you particularly have an eye out for that you think are really great?
I don't really watch it. Really, I don't really watch it unless I hear there's a good sketch or there's a host on that I really like. It's too difficult to relive that Saturday night. I love doing Saturday Night Live, but just the stress of it, the changing, running under the bleachers and getting dressed and undressed and trying to make it out there in time and trying to see where the cue cards are and not look like you're watching the cue cards. Lorne Michaels said something interesting. He was a creator of the show. He said that everybody's favorite generation seems to be when their favorite generation of SNL was when they were in high school. So if I was in high school in the 80s, then I would like whoever's on the cast in the 80s, you know, and that's the way it is, I think, with every generation. They like, you know, no one's going to say today that their favorite genre was the original cast with John Belushi and all of that. My son always watches snippets of SNL on YouTube, like every kid does. There's only snippets of everything. And after a while I said, you should check out my years on SNL. I've been saying that for years. And finally I sat him down. Okay, I said, yeah, Kate McKinnon is great. And I do like Kate McKinnon. I think she's one of the most amazing sketch players ever, aside from Jan Hooks and Gilda Radner. Well, there's a lot of them. But so I showed him the sketches I was in, and I haven't seen them in a long time. And as I was watching with him, I thought, these are really long. These are long sketches. Because we're just so used to watching short attention things now, just little things here and there. And back then it was just, you know, long.
Just kind of let them run, gave them a little bit more space.
Yeah.
Kevin, what else before you go? What else are you working on now? You're an artist, you're a musician, you're an almost fluent Spanish speaker, I imagine. What else are you gonna? You're hiking, you're doing stand up. What's the next thing?
Well, my book comes out October 25th, and my hiking show, 4th season, comes out October 27th, 2 days later. So it's called Hiking with Kevin, and this is my 4th year of doing it, minus the 2 pandemic years. And it's something I really love doing. I hike with a different celebrity in the canyons, mostly of LA and Malibu, although I just recently did a hike in Ireland with Paul Reiser, and I've done some hikes in New York with Paul Rudd and a few other people. So I just love doing that. I film it on my selfie, you know, I do a selfie stick with a GoPro on the end, and and I have a drone that I added to the whole thing, that I fly the drone a little bit, and then I go home, I edit it on Premiere Pro. And a lot of times somebody will show up and they'll say, "Where's the crew?" They're thinking, I said, I'm the crew right here. I got the selfie stick and the camera. So I've done over 100 hikes so far. I'm exhausted, but I love doing it. I love doing it. So, between the caricatures and the hiking thing, I stay pretty busy. And the Spanish.
And the Spanish and you're getting those steps in, Kevin. You're getting your steps in every
Yeah, a
day.
lot of steps. I stopped using the Fitbit, by the way. And now I keep track of them in my head. And so if somebody starts talking to me, I get distracted. I got to start all the way over again from the beginning. One, two.
So that's good. It keeps you even more fit. Kevin
Exactly.
Nealon, the book, once again, is called I Exaggerate, My Brushes with Fame. New season of Hiking with Kevin on YouTube. Stand up all over the place. Kevin Nealon, what a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much and good luck with all of it.
Thank you. Nice talking to you too.